Welcome to the Rustic Garden Homestead. Today I want to show you how you can make compost out of alfalfa pellets. That's a 40-pound bag. If you're concerned about sprays being in the alfalfa, just pick out a bag of organic alfalfa. You can also use wood pellets. Wood pellets are used in stoves. Most of them are just pressed sawdust. If you're concerned about what's in them, number one, you don't want to look for any kind of waxes or binders. You just want wood in the pellets. But contact the company, ask them how they process their wood pellets. So it's a 40-pound bag of alfalfa, 40-pound bag of wood pellets, $20 or so on the left, $8 on the right. Let's say this costs $30 for 80 pounds worth of material. I just want to cut in real quick and emphasize what you're making is compost. You're creating this wonderful mass of organic matter that's going to really feed your soil. It'll feed worms and microbiology. It's not just a fertilizer. Yes, there's going to be N, P, and K in there. And this is the process that we're going to do through the rest of the video. And then it will compost down. And you'll see that if you watch the rest of the video. Again, this is compost. It's not your basic organic granular fertilizer. It's also really nice, and it can function as an alternative to peat moss. If you're going to be using it in your containers, I would use 1/2 to 1/3 of the compost that you're making here, and then half of your potting mix or container mix, maybe 2/3. Don't grow straight into this, but this is a great alternative to peat moss, and it's compost. It's organic matter that your garden's going to love. I've done this video before about 3 years ago, and I've kind of refined it. I recommend now 2 parts alfalfa, 2 parts green, and 1 part browns, or your wood pellets. And I use a 5-gallon bucket, so I will fill this to the top with alfalfa pellets. Half a gallon, that's 2 parts. And then I will fill the same container halfway, so that's 1 part. 2 parts green, 1 part wood pellets. And you can use any size container. 2-to-1 ratio means you just use that container twice with the alfalfa, and you use it once with the wood pellets. We're going to add water. I'm going to take you over to the compost tumblers. That's what I recommend using for this type of process. And I'll show you how we're going to hydrate this up, mix it together, and in about 60 days you're going to have viable compost. Now, this is great. I have tons of leaves, I have grass, I have all that kind of stuff. I have compost piles, I make a lot. But maybe you're in a small space, you don't have access to resources. This is perfect for container gardens. You want to use a compost tumbler, and that makes all the difference. Alfalfa pellets themselves, they're like let's just call it a 2-1-1 fertilizer. So right in there already you have 2% nitrogen, 1% phosphorus, 1% potassium. It varies a little bit. Also a natural growth hormone. There's minerals and different things in wood pellets. Composted together, you get a great product for your containers. You can also throw in other things like some wood ash from your fire pit. You can throw in scraps if you want. But if you truly want this to be done in about 60 days, maybe a little bit longer in the winter, you just want to stick with the alfalfa and the wood pellets. All right, let me go show you how to make this. These are my compost tumblers, perfect for small spaces. I built this stand because I don't want to bend over and have to, spin the tumblers. And they're real easy. You put the lid on that's right here and you just give it a spin. So I did create this stand so everything is about shoulder high. This is compost using the alfalfa and wood pellets that's already done. It's been sitting in here for a while. I made it over the summer. It's great stuff. Perfect for loosening soil. Can be a little bit of an alternative to peat moss. Great for containers. If you're concerned maybe the wood chips or the wood pellets, the sawdust doesn't break down fully, you could just soak this in with fish emulsion. That brings in extra nitrogen. That will help further break down the sawdust that's in there. But by adding 2 parts alfalfa, maybe 3 parts if you want, you really heat this up. I will link the original video in. I don't know, it's about 8 minutes long, but it shows you how this heats, how to create it. Just follow the ratio of really 2 parts alfalfa, 1 part sawdust. And every couple of years I change how I do things, but this is just beautiful stuff. Nice and dark, no odor, holds moisture. It's got some fertilizer, great stuff in there. This is where we're going to make the compost today. Always leave a little bit in there. This is some old stuff. That looks great too. That just has a lot of the microbes and different things in there that will help kickstart the process. If you're just starting from scratch, throw in some soil from your garden or anything just to bring some microbes in there. All right, let's make the mix. The whole key to making this is making sure the ratios stay correct. That's 2 parts alfalfa to 1 part wood pellets, maybe 3 parts alfalfa if you wanted to heat up a little bit more and compost a little bit more quickly. The more greens you have, the more it can heat up and the quicker it can finish. You can do this more slowly. You can mix in alfalfa, wood pellets, throw in scraps, do this process over, many months. But if you want it to be done in about 2 months, 3 months, this is the way that I recommend. When you're doing your ratios, remember, it's just the equal size container. 2 parts, 2 of these of alfalfa, 1 part of the wood pellets. Or you could use a smaller container. If you're doing smaller amounts, 2 parts, 1 part. And you're gonna have to mix this with water. Using the 5-gallon bucket, that's what I typically use. That makes a whole lot. When I do that, I have to mix it in a wheelbarrow because it's going to absorb at least its own weight, if not more, in water. So you really have to use the water to break this down. Some rain got in here. So you see what happens to the pellets when they get wet. They expand, and that's what's going to help us make the compost. Same thing with the wood pellets. Some water got in there, so you want to keep these dry, and it expands. So let's just start, keep it simple. We're going to do, let me get that in frame, 2 parts alfalfa, 1. I'm not going to do the whole bucket this way, but you'll get the idea. You don't have to be exact. 2. And then we're going to throw in 1 part wood pellets. That makes a ratio that I recommend. Mix it up dry, and then you would add water. So I'm going to fill this halfway with the ratio, and then I'm going to fill it with water almost to the top. We're going to let it absorb. It's going to break into little particles, and I'll show you the next step. It's been 7 full days. I have not spun the tumbler, let it sit for 7 days, and you can see that it is over 120 degrees. Yesterday, days 5 and 6, it was even warmer than that. So you want to let this sit for 7 days, let it heat up, and when we dig in there, you can see all the activity that's going on. You can even see some steam coming up. I mean, that is really working. It even feels hotter than 120 in there. So we let this sit for 7 days. I'm going to close it up, and now I'm going to give it a spin. This is what it looks like coming about halfway into the 5-gallon container, and you can see that it's more greens to browns. You definitely want that. I'm going to put in 2 gallons of water, and it's going to probably need more than that. Let's just dump it all the way in. Let that soak for a good 20 minutes. You don't really have to mix it up if you don't want to, but you're going to have to put in another 2 gallons. You really want to bring the water up to here. This is going to swell up, at least double its size. I think in the original video, I think it almost gets to 4 or 5 times its size. Anyway, you want to do this now. You do not want to do it in your compost tumbler. Tumblers have holes in it. The water's just going to pour out. You really want everything to soak up the water now. I did this earlier with half of a container, just like you just saw. And this is what it looks like after about 30 minutes. It's starting to absorb all the water and break up, but there's still some hard pieces in there. But that's what you want it to look like. But you want all the solid pieces to be broken up. And like if you go to this alfalfa piece, and we break it, it's still dry in the middle. So I could sprinkle some water on here. If you can do it all, let me just spin around here, in the container, in your 5-gallon container, and then just pour it right into the compost tumbler, it saves you a step. But if you're making a lot of it, it's going to have to go into a wheelbarrow, something that's waterproof, because you may have to add some more water, mix it up, and this is what it looks like. So let me just let everything finish out. We'll get it into the tumbler. It's been about 20 minutes, and this is really soaked. It'll still absorb. It's fine if it's soaking wet like this to start. Better to have it fully, and some of these still are hard in the middle. So this would have to sit probably another 15 or 20 minutes. It's okay if it's sopping wet because your compost tumbler has holes. The excess water will drain out. You really want to activate this with a lot of water. So I'm going to dump this over into the wheelbarrow, kind of get it set up. We'll get it into the container. The beauty of all this is, again, as I said earlier in the video, this is not just a fertilizer. This is not like your organic granular fertilizer where you're really paying $2 to $3 a pound. It's expensive. It works. It's not organic matter. It does not feed worms. It does not support your soil over the long run. Yes, organic granular feeds the microbes when they break it down, but it doesn't do much more than that. This is much, much better stuff. So this is good cost. At about 40 cents a pound, you have 80 pounds of material here. That's $32. So you're only paying 40 cents a pound to create this great compost. Yes, it is going to break down, decay down by a third, maybe a little bit more, but you're just going to have beautiful stuff to use in your garden, in containers, in a planting hole, as a top dressing. So it does take about an hour to go from your bagged product to hydrating it and getting it all set up for composting. I cut in the 2020 video earlier just so you didn't have to watch another video, but you get a sense of how this heats up. So once it goes into here, you're going to let it sit for a good 7 days, and you'll see how it heats up. You could see all the mycelium and the white growth that was in there, all kinds of good stuff going on. This is going to break down, and remember, again, I want to stress, this is compost. This helps build your soil, feeds the microbes, feeds the worms. So we started out with pellets like that, added water, we end up with this. If this seems dry to you, water is key. You want this to be a little more wet than maybe you think. Add some water now. The excess will drain out. Put the lid on, you leave it alone. In about 60 days, you're going to end up with compost that looks like this. And then just a word of caution, maybe you don't do it right and there's too many wood chips in there or sawdust in there, and the sawdust, because it's not fully broken down, which if you follow the 2-to-1 ratio, it'll be rare, but it could happen. So if you use wood that you put into the garden, that sawdust may pull some nitrogen from the soil and your plants may struggle. The way you fix that, simply add in some water-soluble fertilizer with nitrogen, like fish emulsion right in here. That'll give it an extra nitrogen boost. Or when you go to use this, if you see your container plants are struggling, or plants that you use this to kind of, build up the planting hole are struggling, just hit it with a water-soluble fertilizer. That will take care of it. Great stuff, inexpensive to make, alternative, I believe, to peat moss. Conditions soil, feeds the soil, has NP and K in there, a growth hormone, just really, really good stuff. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. I will link the original video in there, but what I showed you about how it heated up, that's the point that I wanted to make. This is going to heat up, it's going to break down quickly. Thanks for watching.